Howdy y'all, my name is Dave, this is the Anime Field Guide podcast, and you are listening to The Studio Rundown. This is my series where I take you through the history and business practices of anime production houses across Japan. Today's episode features the Mad Lads of Studio Madhouse. Special thank you to Dark Cat for the theme music. This is Lover's Oasis, courtesy of Upbeat for making the song available. Give Dark Cat some love on Spotify as well. Studio Madhouse has been through it all as a company with more than 50 years of animation history and an extensive catalog of well-beloved TV shows, OVAs, and film. There's a lot to cover and not a lot of time to do it, so let's dive right into things. Studio Madhouse was founded in 1972 by ex-Mushi Productions animators. It was headquartered in Nakano, Tokyo. For founders, we have Osamu Dezaki, who's from Mushi Pro in 1963. He animated Astro Boy. He was also on episode direction and storyboards for 1969's Dororo, and he was the director of Tomorrow's Joe. We have Akio Sugino, who also started at Mushi Pro with Astro Boy in the late 60s. He worked with Dezaki on several projects as an animation director and character designer, such as the sequel to Tomorrow's Joe, Aim for the Ace, and Treasure Island. He's also the character designer across the majority of the Blackjack series. Sugino-san left Madhouse in 1980 to form his own Studio Annapurna with Osamu Dezaki. And he's still active today. Most recently, he was chief animation director on The Fable, which is 2024 with Tokyo Movie. We have Shigeyuki Hayashi, better known as Rintaro. He's worked in the anime industry since the age of 17. He started with 1958's Panda and the Magic Serpent over at Toei, and he worked under Tezuka at Mushi Pro on episodes of Astro Boy, Kimba the White Lion. He went freelance in 1971, so while he did found Madhouse, he didn't stay with the studio, but he was a frequent collaborator. He's also a founding member of the Japanese Animators Creator Association. It is the labor group advocating for better working conditions in the industry. We have Yoshiaki Kawajiri, who you will hear a lot through this episode, the peak director throughout the 80s and the 90s, most known for his action films and such, and he's still working today. He primarily seems to have moved on to storyboarding since the late 2000s, but you'll still see his name attached to Chihaya Furu, One Punch Man, Sunny Boy, Frieren, Orb, and Vinland Saga. And last but not least, we certainly have Masao Maruyama, who's been the studio president from 1980 through 2000. He's been a major creative force in the anime industry with a reputation for giving opportunities to a lot of up-and-comers in the industry, cultivating directors like Satoshi Kon, Sanao Katabuchi, Yuasa, Mitsuo Iso, Hoseda. So many names credited to this man for giving them their shot. Maruyama-san left Madhouse in 2011 to found Studio Mappa, and then in April of 2016, he left Mappa to found Studio M2, where he remains the current president at the time of this recording. And according to Maruyama, Madhouse was taken from a store named Matsuru House, once located in the Chiba prefecture, where Madhouse, the studio, was originally located. He's very coy about the kind of store that it was, and even in the interview, he kind of whispers it to the interviewer, and they go, "Oh yeah, we can't put this in the article." So, indeed, he was also aware that Madhouse in English refers to a psychiatric hospital, so he wanted the company to have this distinct name, and Madhouse certainly stuck. And so the studio began as an outsourcing studio under Tokyo Movie Shinse's company, with funding from Tokyo Movie's founder, Yutaka Fujioka. So the debut series was a co-production. This was Aim for the Ace in October of 1973, adapting the popular girls' tennis manga by Sumika Yamamoto. This was 26 episodes, directed by Osamu Dezaki. He also came back to direct the 1979 film. Further co-productions involve the baseball series Samurai Giants in the fall of 1973 and Judo Sanka in 1974, adapting manga by Ko Inoue and Iki Kajiwara / Asaka Takamori. These are the folks who also did Ashita no Joe, Tiger Mask, and Star of the Giants. We also have Nobody's Boy Remy from October 1977 to October of 1978, a 51-episode series directed by Dezaki. He would then direct the 1980 sequel film. And Nobody's Boy Remy, the Animego company, just released the full series to kick off their Ruined Childhood label, so it is available for Blu-ray purchase if you are so interested. We also have, in 1978, Dezaki directed the 26-episode series Treasure Island. They also had some production assistance with Toei, so we have 1977's Jeter Mars, which was created by Osamu Tezuka for television and then directed by Rintaro. Tezuka basically wanted to remake or make a sequel for Astro Boy, but due to his financial difficulties at the time following the closure of Mushi Pro, he couldn't exactly secure the rights. So instead, Jetter Mars was created as totally not Astro Boy, but retreaded most of Astro's thematic journey. 1982 also saw the creation of Project Team Argos. This was by Masaru Maruyama and Rintaro and art director Takamura Mukuo. And this was a group that co-produced multiple works with Madhouse until 1988. This includes Harmageddon, Dagger of Kamui, both of these directed by Rintaro. Also 1985, you have Bobby's Girl and multiple OVAs for The Phoenix. The Phoenix is a manga by Osamu Tezuka. And then in 1983, you have the release of the theatrical film Barefoot Gen and its sequel in 86. This is World War II from a child's point of view and mainly focused on the immediate events surrounding the bombing of Hiroshima. In 1984, we have the film Galactic Patrol Lensman, co-produced with Tatsunoko Productions, based on the science fiction novels by Edward Elmer Smith. This was the directorial debut for Yoshiaki Kawajiri alongside Kazuyuki Hirokawa. And from October 1984 through March of 85, we had the 25-episode TV series animated by Madhouse and picked up by Harmony Gold for American distribution. This was Lensman, Secret of the Lens. Yoshiaki Kawajiri had his solo directorial debut on Wicked City, the movie in 1987, followed by Demon City Shinjuku in 1988. These are two films/OVAs produced by Madhouse for Japan Home Video. Wicked City and Demon City are based on the novels by Hideyuki Kikuchi, who then became friends with Kawajiri. Kikuchi-san is best known for a little series of books titled Vampire Hunter D, which we'll get into in a few minutes here. We also have Goku Midnight Eye and its sequel. These were released in 1989 alongside Toei. These are what you would say like the violent neo-noir science fiction/fantasies, showcasing extreme action but with high-quality animation with all the blood and titties that defined anime in the 80s and the 90s, that if you were talking about the bad reputation for watching those horrible cartoons, here's your guy. And so going into the 90s, we begin to see the turning point for Madhouse as they go into a full production studio, beginning with Yawara, a fashionable judo girl. This is based on the manga by Naoki Urasawa, who we'll get to in a few minutes. The anime for this ran from October 1989 to September of 1992, along with a feature film in August of 92, got a TV special in 96, but particularly its 1990s Record of Lodos War, the 13-episode OVA series. This was adapting the high fantasy light novel series. It's very Dungeons & Dragons inspired. We also have another Hideyuki Kikuchi novel, The Wind Named Amnesia. In 1991, Madhouse entered an exclusive partnership with South Korean animation studio Dr. Movie, which was a studio that was subcontracted across several projects, handled a lot of CGI for Madhouse. We had some further investments later in 2001, resulting in Madhouse becoming a partial owner of the Dr. Movie studio. Also, Madhouse made some key partnerships, creative partnerships during this time. Most notably, we have the partnership with Clamp, which is the famous group of the 4 all-female manga creators, and their relationship with Madhouse began in 1992 with the 2-episode OVA of the dark fantasy manga Tokyo Babylon. The second episode was released in 1994. In 1996, we have X, or X the Movie. This was directed by Rintaro alongside Clamp writer Nanase Okawa on scripting. X later got a full TV series in 2001. This one was directed by Kawajiri. Obviously, we have the big one, Cardcaptor Sakura, the Juggernaut Magical Girl series that ran from 1998 to 2000. This is also the directorial debut of Morio Asaka. Cardcaptor Sakura obviously came over here as Cardcaptors in an edited form, similar to Sailor Moon. It premiered on Kids WB, ran on Cartoon Network and Toonami. Morio Asaka also directed 2001's Chobits, and then he returned in the 2010s for Cardcaptor Sakura, The Clear Cards. Jumping back into the 90s, we have 1993's Ninja Scroll. Again, another violent ninja action movie with a Kawajiri, just stellar animation. In 1994, we have some OVAs. We have Final Fantasy Legend of the Crystal, which I believe is somewhat based on Final Fantasy V or set in a far future of that. We also have 1996, Blackjack the Movie, another popular shonen series, Yu Yu Hakusho with Studio Dean, and then they co-produced DNA Squared with Studio Pierrot. Another big one, in 1998, we have Trigon, the popular space western manga by Yasuhiro Naitao, which came over here and was led by the popular English dub cast with Johnny Youngbosch, which basically kickstarted his entire voice acting career. And Trigun obviously was part of the big space western trilogy next to Cowboy Bebop and Outlaw Star from Studio Sunrise. Trigun, by comparison, is seen more as like a cult classic, as more like sitting there with Outlaw Star. Trigun did receive a movie in 2010. This was Badlands Rumble, animated by Madhouse. And then outside of Madhouse, Trigun's coming back in a sense. Like since 2024, it's got the deluxe manga treatment by Dark Horse. We also have a new TV series, Trigun Stampede, animated by Studio Orange in the CGI studio. In 1999, Madhouse acquired the Powerhouse Studio, which had produced DNA Squared, as well as the anime based on the Bomberman video games. This studio would become a full subsidiary under Madhouse, changing its name to Madbox, which was another subcontractor handling CGI, finishing, and editing the later aspects of production. But going into the 2000s, Madhouse would enter into what I would arguably say is its golden age. I want to highlight two things. In 2001, we have Yoshiaki Kawajiri directing Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. There's so much that I want to say about this, but think of it as like Dracula meets Fallout meets The Witcher. Again, these are very popular novels written by Hideyuki Kikuchi. Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust is only the second animation project this series has ever gotten, however. And at the time, the animation producer on this movie, Mataichi Yamamoto, he decided he wanted to release Bloodlust in the United States as like a dual release. And so while the main animation was completed by Madhouse in Japan, post-production was handled in California as part of that partnership. Also in 2001, Rintaro directed the film adaptation of Osamu Tezuka's Metropolis, which was made with the permission of Tezuka's estate because the man himself forbade Rintaro or anyone from adapting Metropolis. Not so much a content thing, it was just an early manga by Tezuka. He didn't feel like it was worthy of adapting, so Rintaro just took his time, but he really wanted to adapt Metropolis, which was somewhat based on the silent film, but Tezuka had only seen a poster of the silent film. He'd never seen the movie itself. Another just visually stunning film by Madhouse at the time. In 2004, Madhouse Studio was acquired by Index Holdings. Now, Index was founded as a mobile service provider, and then they began to expand more into the entertainment space, so they had acquisitions like Madhouse. I think they even owned the game studio Atlas at one point before that got sold to Sega. And as far as Madhouse's output during this time, I mean, you're talking their golden age, an absolute tear of popular series. We're talking Beyblade, Hajime no Ippo, Claymore, Black Lagoon, Beck Mongolian Chop Squad, Nana, The Animatrix, we have Tengo Tenge, Kashirin Sins, Death Note. We also had some video game partnerships. They animated a short, one-episode short called Final Fantasy VII Last Order, which is a fun watch for you fans of Crisis Core. We also had Devil May Cry, Gungrave, and Maple Story. And in addition to these really popular works above, Madhouse would continue to foster creative partnerships and work with some key directors across the 2000s. So I'm going to talk about a couple of them here as we go through. So we already mentioned Naoki Urasawa, who's the author of Yawara. Then we have Master Keaton in 1999 and Monster in 2004. That's the big one. Master Keaton and Monster were directed by Masayuki Kojima. He left Madhouse in 2010 and is now most well known for directing the Made in Abyss TV series and the movies. Of those three, Monster is obviously the most well known as a suspenseful thriller, as you have a medical doctor framed for murder, and he goes on this Europe-trotting adventure to try and find the real killer and uncovers this massive global conspiracy in the process. It reminds me a lot of like The Fugitive with Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones. We have director Mamoru Hosoda, who joined Madhouse after he left Toei. So coming in from the Digimon movies, he directed The Girl Who Leapt Through Time in 2006, and then Summer Wars in 2009. He left Madhouse and then founded his own studio Chizu in 2011, where he's produced the rest of his films, starting with Wolf Children. We have Takeshi Koike, who was hired by Yoshiaki Kawajiri straight out of high school and worked on a lot of Kawajiri-directed projects afterwards. You have key animations through Goku Midnight Eye, Cyber City Oedo, Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. He directed Animatrix Part 6, that's world record, and then he was fired from Madhouse after directing Redline, which came out in 2009 after a 7-year-long, expensive production cycle. So he's now moved to Telecom Animation, where he directed a striking trilogy of Lupin III movies, with the fourth recently announced for just this year, 2025 actually. We also have the late, great Satoshi Kon, who was brought in after his key animation work on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure with Studio A3P, and in my mind, one of the greatest humanist directors in animation. He directed a string of classics, all at Madhouse, beginning with Perfect Blue, the 1997 psychological thriller. with Millennium Actress in 2001, Tokyo Godfathers in 2003, his only TV series, Paranoia Agent, in 2004, another horror entry. And then in 2006, he directed Paprika. And after that, he was working on another film, but he was taken from us by pancreatic cancer in 2010. Satoshi Kon also helped establish the Japanese Animation Creators Association. Again, that's a nonprofit for improving working conditions for the anime industry. Satoshi Kon also left behind one unfinished movie, The Dream Machine, which Masao Maruyama has held on to, but after looking for a couple of years for a director, he's basically shelved that project indefinitely, so I don't think that film will ever be completed or released to the public. We have Masaki Yuasa, who was brought in by Maruyama-san to create 2 original series. He created and directed 2006 Kemono Zume, which is a horror romance series, and then 2008, after a brief stint at Studio 4C, he directed his second original series, Kaiba, which is a sci-fi drama with an art style paying homage to Osamu Tezuka. And in 2010, Masaki Yuasa directed the movie Tatami Galaxy. We also have another director, Sonao Katabuchi, who was the series composition and also the main director on Black Lagoon, another just big show for Madhouse in 2008. He created and directed the film My Miracle in 2009, and then he followed Maruyama to Studio Mappa in 2011, where then he created and directed In This Corner of the World. We also have Kitaro Kosaka, who was the character designer on Master Keaton and Monster, but he's better known for key animation work during his time at Studio Ghibli. He directed 2 films at Madhouse in the 2000s. This was Nasu, Summer in Andalusia, which is a 2003 short film about cycling, and it's now available for purchase again from Animego. And he did the sequel, Nasu, Suitcase and Migratory Bird, in 2007. And so going into the 2010s, Madhouse started the decade in rough waters, because the parent company, Index, was reeling from the bankruptcy of Japan Development Bank. They were suffering large losses from the loans and the bonds purchased through that bank. And so the fallout as such spread through all its subsidiary companies, Madhouse included. And in fact, the studio went into the red for 2 consecutive quarters as a result, or partly as a result. And so around February 2011, Nippon Television Holdings swooped in and replaced Index Holdings as the majority shareholder, now having an 84.5% stake in the company. And this was to return some financial stability to Madhouse. Index had also been dealing with financial fraud allegations in addition to the mass sell-offs. And so following an official investigation, Index would declare bankruptcy in June of 2013, in which case, in 2014, Nippon Television acquired the remaining Index shares in Madhouse, bringing the total ownership stake to 95%. Throughout all of this, Masao Maruyama left Madhouse following the 2011 NTV acquisition, and this is when he formed Studio Mappa in June, where a number of staff then followed him. And in his own words, Madhouse as an organization had just grown too big, and he was feeling creatively stifled. You know, he liked being in the weeds with the project, but now he was more just managing logistics. And so Maruyama wanted to have something more focused, something smaller where he could still be personally and creatively involved. And these are sentiments that he would later echo in his departure from Mappa in 2016, as he then went to go found Studio M2. But at Madhouse, in the meantime, the leadership gulf left by Maruyama's departure was very much felt, as the studio seemed to become more corporate. And for a lot of folks, Maruyama was Madhouse. You know, we had some comparisons to like Gainax and Studio Trigger. The financial hardships plus Maruyama's departure seemed to spell this sort of low time period, the lull in Madhouse. But we still had a really solid output. We're talking High School of the Dead, Trigun Badlands Rumble. We had the Hunter x Hunter reboot in 2011, Chihaya Furu, Batum, the popular series, baseball series, Ace of the Diamond. This was a co-production with Production IG. Parasite the Maxim, No Game, No Life. Cardcaptor Sakura came back with the Clear Card Saga. Boogie Pop and others. We also had the 3rd season of Hajime no Ippo Rising. We had No Guns Life. Madhouse also partnered with Marvel Studios on 3 projects. Madhouse produced Iron Man, Wolverine, and X-Men, and then they also did Avengers Confidential, Black Widow, and Punisher, as well as Disc Wars Avengers and Marvel's Futures Avengers. They also partnered with Warner Brothers early in the a 2011 Supernatural the Animation. This is also the debut of director Yuzuru Tachikawa. He was brought in through the Young Animators Training Project, so for 2013's Anime Mirai. The Young Animators Training Project was one of a few initiatives in the 2010s to inject new blood into the anime industry. And so Tachikawa-san entered with a one-shot called Death Billiards in 2013 for Anime Mirai, and this became a full series, Death Parade, in 2015. A lot of critical acclaim for that series. He then went to Studio Bones, where he became the main director across all 3 seasons of Mob Psycho 100, and then he worked with Studio Nut on his other projects with Decadence, and then most recently he did the jazz film Blue Giant. 2015 was also the year of One Punch Man. This is directed by Shingo Natsume, who is fresh from directing Space Dandy over at Studio Bones next to Shinichiro Watanabe. Shingo Natsume is going to be very important as we go into the 2020s. And One Punch Man is basically the story about a man who can defeat any person, monster, or kaiju with a single punch. And One Punch Man is a superhero parody where it was produced at the height of the Marvel and the superhero popularity, with a ton of inside gags for the anime viewers and the comic book fans alike, with a bunch of just incredibly well-done action scenes to complement all the comedic stuff. Shingo Natsume also directed Aka 13, Boogie Pop, and others, and then as we go into the 2020s, he's the director of Sonny Boy, which would be one of the few shows that now defines Madhouse as we now cover a little bit of the 2020s. We also have Overlord, had its first season in 2015, which has had several seasons and movies up until just last year. More is certainly on the way. However, through the late 2000s, and especially as we go through the 2010s and now, it's not been all sunshine and rainbows. Aside from the up and down finances of Madhouse during this time, there has been a steady influx of stories covering the overworked state of the anime industry, and this became louder and louder as social media became more prevalent and allowed for a wider coverage of stories and as well as added anonymity. And Madhouse was put in a particularly bad spotlight for its abusive work practices. On May 17th in 2019, there was a press conference held by the Black Companies Union that revealed Madhouse Company was issued a corrective recommendation from the Labor Standards Inspection Office for forcing their employees to illegally work more than 100 hours a month and unpaid overtime. And this had been going on for several years as the company, as well as several other anime studios, but again, Madhouse got a particular attention because the stories there were, the leadership there didn't even attempt to approach the negotiating table or do any sort of collective bargaining agreement with the union or even consider back pay for its workers. And this is where we have more and more talks, and more recently, if you pay attention to the news cycle, you'll see now more talks of possible unionization within the studio or a wider union, government intervention. These are becoming key phrases now as more and more workers within the anime industry begin to speak out on social media. And it's just been Madhouse and MAPPA have been kind of like the poster childs for this movement. But with all that being said, the public sentiment around Madhouse's working conditions has remained a wait-and-see approach. But nevertheless, 2020s, we started to see more of a, quote, return to form for the studio in terms of its animation output. Beginning in 2021 with Sonny Boy, we had the film Goodbye Donglese in 2022 for some notable anime original works. We had continued adaptations. We had Overlord was still getting seasons. We had My Love Story with Yamada-kun at level 999, No Guns Life 2020, The Vampire Dies in No Time, Dinner Table Detective, and Trillion Game. In fall 2023, we had the big one, Frieren Beyond Journey's End. This is based on the popular fantasy manga that tells the story of an immortal elf mage who is part of the group that slew the Demon King and returned peace to the land. Frieren then embarks on a journey to understand humanity after one of her former companions, Himmel the hero, passes away from old age. And backing this up is the recently concluded Orb on the Movements of the Earth. This is a historical drama set in 15th century Poland, where the geocentric model of the universe reigns supreme, and the study of the heliocentric model, so the sun is the center of the solar system, this is seen as heresy by the church, with potentially lethal consequences. But this multi-year, multi-generational epic search for the truth will not be silenced. So Frieren and Orb, amongst a few other things, seem to be a return to, these are new Madhouse classics that could go on to define its output through the 2020s. As of this recording, we have some upcoming projects that include Season 2 of Frieren in 2026. In fall 2025, there's one I'm looking forward to, the anime adaptation of the manga One Dance, which is a story of high schoolers in a dance club gaining self-confidence. I think it's also a little bit of a romantic story as well. Shingo Natsume is returning with another original anime film project titled Ghost, just labeled for 2027. And that's pretty much it as far as where we are in June of 2025. I think to kind of wrap this episode up, I'd say there's a lot of challenges remain with the company culture at Madhouse, and this certainly needs to be addressed in a positive and sustainable manner if Madhouse wants to have another 50 years as a successful animation company. So I would say while public sentiment for Madhouse's recent animation output, I would say, has very greatly improved in the 2020s, I think it's important to stay informed and make your voice heard. Products should not come at the expense of the workers, no matter how entertaining that product may be. But what do you guys think? How would you address the studio culture or the anime industry culture? What are some of your favorite anime series by Studio Madhouse? And are there any series or manga otherwise that you would like to see the studio adapt? Let me know down in the comments, and until next time, I hope you guys stay safe and watch more cartoons.